Hey there! Are you someone who has a bearded dragon that's very small right now and you want them to become very big and strong like this one? Or are you maybe someone thinking about buying a bearded dragon and seeing if you're interested and are able to care for their needs? Well, either way, this video is to help you to figure out what's best for your bearded dragon, what's worked for me, and things I just know from a lot of research. Here is my beautiful fiery baby, Sorrin. He is 1 year and 5 months old, and for reference, bearded dragons are generally at adulthood at about 1.5 years old, so he's just about to become an adult. And yeah, as you can see, he's pretty darn healthy, he's pretty big, he's active, and he likes hanging out. Now, one of my favorite things about Sorrin is the fact that he's a super bright orange, red, mixed with yellow and white. And as you can see here, he didn't look like that when he was younger, more like a brown beige with just some red and orange spotted around. However, after the first 6 months, his colors became a lot more saturated and they basically solidified into the colors that he has today, even if it's a different pattern. And outside of genetics, there were a few things that I did to help maintain this bright, vibrant color. Those 3 things being a balanced diet, proper bathing procedure, making sure that the bulbs in his enclosure are up to date, and also taking him outside. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't take him out all the time. Bearded dragons are solitary and they usually prefer to be alone on some days, like what you're seeing right here in this photo. However, it's generally a good idea to let them out and socialize them with yourself and other people or other pets in the household if you have them, because they can be very inquisitive, curious, and enjoy having adventures. Also, natural sunlight is very good for their skin's health and helps bolster color. Now, I take Sorrin out very frequently. A lot of times whenever I'm walking the dog, I'm walking my bearded dragon, and for some reason he likes looking at things in reverse, so a lot of times you can't even tell he's on me until I turn around and he's right back there. I've seen some people debate on whether or not you should take them outside or what ages you should take them outside. When I first had him and he was only the size of my finger, I didn't really take him out that much at all, and he seemed to be struggling a little bit with vitamin D and vitamin C. He was eating plenty, having all the vitamin C powder and everything that he needed, but he just seemed to be struggling to get coloration in and also struggling to really start getting those scales more refined. So I actually started taking him out about 2 weeks old, and I just kept doing 10-minute sessions with him sitting right here on my finger, on my hand, and I'm just standing out in the sun. And I just kept doing that for several months until eventually he got to the point to where now he's just climbing up all around me. He feels safe, he feels secure. You can even see he's like looking around. He's not really all that spooked. He's just kind of hanging on because he knows he can. This kind of activity also helps reduce stress and gives them just quality of life overall. The more that they're outside with you, the more they'll trust the outside. Now, another thing too is you kind of have to let them do stuff like this. It can be very distracting if it's your first time owning a reptile with claws. For me, it's not. But allowing them to do this sort of thing on you and just be able to roam around as if you're a big old tree actually helps them trust you more. And sometimes they trust you a little too much to where they start to slip down like he's doing. And you have to be like, hey, come on up here, bud. I definitely recommend using shirts made out of stuff like denim, like the shirt you're seeing in this video, because it helps to give them a lot of grip while also reducing any stress on your skin. The more you do this, the more they'll trust you. Now, something that's scary, but you have to get them used to while they're young, is being in water or, at least having a pool of water that they're standing in so that way you can bathe them. If not for the dirt in their scales, it also just helps them to shed and get moisture overall. The younger they are, generally the more often you're going to have to bathe them just to get them used to it, but eventually you'll find a smooth rhythm of like every 2 days, or like I have with my adult beardy right now, once every week outside of winter. Now, you need to keep an eye on them the entire time they're in the water, because they're likely going to do things like you're seeing on screen right now. They're going to put themselves in a panic, and especially if you see any gray or dark black starting to show up, that means they're stressed and they genuinely feel like they're about to die. If you have them in a low level of water like I do, obviously that's not going to happen, but they'll still puff up, get stressed, and it's generally advised once they do that to just pull them out and stop and try again another day. Now, this clip right here can also show why it's good to stay calm, because he starts swimming around and he seems to be okay, and then at one point he randomly stiffens up, and when he does that, I'm like, oh crap, is he drowning? Is something actually happening? No. My bearded dragon has a personality quirk where whenever he poops, he will stiffen up his muscles and go limp. He just does it. He's completely fine when he does it, but that's just how he chooses to go, and whenever he does that, it scares the crap out of me. And while your bearded dragon might not have that personality quirk, it's just generally good to stay calm while also vigilant, because anything can happen, especially if they start to drink, which is when they'll start gulping water. Don't pick them up, don't touch them, just leave them, because if you pick them up during that, they can choke and end up drowning even though they're perfectly out of water. Generally, a good rule of thumb to see if they're acclimated properly or not is if they poop. If they poop, they're not stressed, and if they're not stressed, that usually means they're fine. Some bearded dragons really like water, some bearded dragons really don't like water. Mine doesn't like water that much, but he'll tolerate it, and he'll even let me use like brushes on his scales and stuff to help get rid of dirt and grime. Now, getting them on vegetables young is very, very important. Bearded dragons tend to be stubborn towards protein if you don't feed them enough vegetables when they're young and small, and the pickier that they are, the harder it is to get them the nutrition that they actually need to build proper scales and bone. A good way to do this is to use natural produce you can get from the grocery store, washing it, and giving them just a variety of things. Now, make sure that it's something they can eat without issue. You know, you can give some vegetables as treats, and some of them should be staples, and you should know which is which. Kale, mustard greens, collard greens, very good staples. Spinach, lettuce, chard should only be used as treats. A lot of people use those as staples, and they shouldn't be, because they have oxalates, which are very unhealthy for reptiles as it can destroy their scales. And not only that, but too much of those oxalates can also cause metabolic bone disease, which is basically a ticking time bomb of how long your bearded dragon can live while its bones are disintegrating. Now, in terms of getting them to eat it, for example, in this clip, I'm using things like broccoli, cauliflower, cilantro on top of the kale to entice it into eating those leafy greens. Sorrin eats his leafy greens like crazy now, and he has no issue. But when he was younger, I really had to throw in a bunch of different tastes and smells to get him intrigued enough to even want to try. And as you can see in this clip, I wasn't that successful for a long time. A trick that helped me is to stop cooking the vegetables, because the more that you cook the vegetables, the less that they smell good and the less nutrients they actually have. Once I started giving raw but clean vegetables, he was all over it. And yes, that also goes for frozen and freeze-dried vegetables that you'll find in PetSmart. A lot of times they won't eat it because it smells dead and just is basically mush with no flavor. I highly suggest doing a lot of research and putting lists together of the types of vegetables that your bearded dragon wants to eat, likes to eat, and can eat, etc. Because the more variety you bring to their vegetable diet, the more healthy they're going to be overall. In terms of the protein side of their diet, I also recommend variety, mainly just to give them different flavors so they don't get bored with protein. And generally speaking, they don't usually ever get bored with it. They eat a lot of it, especially when they're younger. They need a more protein-heavy diet. But giving them variety doesn't hurt. It just gives them better quality of life, and at the same time, it gets them used to a lot of different types of foods. The more foods that they're used to, generally, the harder it is for them to have any illness or infection. At least in terms of ones that are caused by food. Now, a mistake that a lot of people make when they first get a bearded dragon and it's very young is they usually put them in a super big enclosure right off the bat. That's not really a good idea, mainly because they're small, and he has a 50-gallon enclosure now because he's an adult. He needs all that space, and it's very wide on the floor. But back in the day, I had him in that. And it's because he was literally only the size of my finger, and I tried putting him in a bigger one like the one over there, but he kept consistently putting himself on the cold side, And whenever he did that, he would start to look sick or not be interested in things. And putting him in the smaller environment where there's not as much of a temperature gradient, but it's solidly around 80 degrees, really seemed to help him out. I only had him in this smaller enclosure for about 6 months, and then as soon as he turned 6 months old, I got him the 50-gallon enclosure. But generally, when they're small to where they're not even bigger than the size of your hand, you should always get them a smaller enclosure to compensate, and it also helps them feel a lot more confident. Instead of feeling like they're stuck in open space, it's a little more cluttered, and they're a little more boxed in, so they feel more secure. Plus, if your bearded dragon is like mine and somehow got on the ceiling and starts crawling around upside down, it's not going to hurt as much as it would from a proper large enclosure because it doesn't have to fall that far. Another benefit for having a smaller enclosure when your bearded dragon is younger is the fact that there's not much of a temperature gradient. You really need that when they're an adult, but when they're younger, it's much better to have just a solid temperature throughout the entire environment. That way they don't get somewhere where they're cold and they get sick, or they end up somewhere where it's too hot and they end up burning themselves. It's a nice little in-between, and giving them a small enclosure to get settled into first just gets them acclimated overall, and also helps to make sure that there's no other temperature-related illnesses that happen. So a lot of times, affection from reptiles is pretty simple and also a little weird looking. Like, for example, what he's doing on the back right there, crawling around, occasionally looking at my hair, looking at my face as I'm talking. That's him showing affection. It's a lot of times it doesn't go beyond that. There are times where they'll cuddle up to you and nap on you, or they'll nap on something that you sit on a lot. Like, he'll nap on my chair downstairs, or he will nap on my bed, which is right over there sometimes. Another thing that's important to note is bearded dragon behavior in terms of affection differs between the individual. Like, for example, mine will head bob at me when he's excited and really wants to see me. Other bearded dragons will use head bobbing as a sign of aggression. So you really got to pay attention and watch for clues on their face, on their tail, on their scales to make sure that you're actually understanding what they're doing as affection, or if they're trying to get you to do something else. And it's generally pretty hard to tell how a reptile is feeling because they're usually more relaxed and reserving as much energy as they can. But the more that you hang out with your bearded dragon and the more that you do stuff with them, the more that you'll notice like what their kind of expressions of affection or love or excitement or fear are, to the point to where you don't even have to question it and you'll just act on instinct. For a lot of people, it's hard to tell how your bearded dragon is feeling. For example, he will stretch his beard a lot of the time, but he's not actually aggressive. He'll just have it all puffed out, and he'll be looking like he's angry, but he's really just kind of hanging out in his enclosure and not bothered. And then as soon as I open it and I start petting his head, he doesn't mind at all. But what I typically look for is right here on the side. You can see the gray patches in the beard, and right now it's at like a light gray, but whenever he starts getting more frustrated or a little bit more aggressive, it starts to get to like a deeper black, and his tail will also get to a deeper black too. As you can tell, it's like just a little slight gray, but typically for males there's always at least some form of gray on them, even if they're not stressed at all. And you can tell he's fine, he's relaxed, he's just hanging out, he's trusting me, so he's not frustrated at all. It's just a little bit of gray here and there because he's becoming an adult. Something I see a lot of people do by mistake is misgendering their or missexing their bearded dragon, which is actually somewhat important. However, I would like to say, from all the research I've read and the vets that I've talked to in regards to Sorrin here, who presented as if he were a female for the vast majority of his life, you never really know until they're about to become an adult. And you can kind of see right here these two bulbous protrusions and those big femoral pores. That means he's a male. But it's very hard to tell, up until they're about this big and about to shift right into adulthood, because that's when they start doing the stuff like brumating and actually getting their hormones in order. Now, brumating you should not worry about until they are an adult, and if you see your reptile trying to brumate when they are a juvenile, you need to get them up and out of that because otherwise they will not grow properly. I would go into more detail here, but it would literally take up a vast majority of the entire video, so I highly suggest doing research on brumation, especially with bearded dragons specifically, and also asking a vet on whether or not you should do it with yours. For example, I've gotten approval for mine after he became an adult because I got him checked up, and the doctor was able to see that all his hormones were in check and everything's good. And as you can see with the habitat that I'm showing right now, it's simulating the natural environment that he would be in the wild, and so brumation is a natural activity that he would be going to once we hit winter this year. Now, when it comes to environments and enclosures, I'm more of a naturalist. As you can see with the designs that I've done for the enclosure for my bearded dragon, I include a lot of wood, natural leaves, natural plants, a lot of stuff he can climb up on, and even areas where bugs can hide and nest and reproduce within the habitat, so that way he always has a constant food supply even if I'm not here. I also use cocoa peat, compost, and moss, and a bunch of other stuff to encourage isopod and springtail populations, which are in there, and that controls any mold or fungus or any mites that would ever possibly show up. Being the expert on bugs that I am, I've basically turned it into a bug's paradise as well as a paradise for my bearded dragon, where he basically resides as its ruler and he can cull the population as he pleases to get a meal. Another thing I would like to mention is stuck shed. I don't know, it seems like something that every single bearded dragon owner has to deal with at some point. It's like all these bearded dragons will get a stuck shed at some point. Like, for example, you can see some of the slight scale damage here on this part of the tail where there was stuck shed, and you can see like this little gray part here, this little gray part here, or like this little red thing here, how it's like an incomplete scale. And I don't know what to do to really get past that. I have done so much. I've tried the medicines from the vet. I've done all these different diets. When he was shedding, I gave him a bath every single day just to make sure, and even still, the shed got stuck. And I think it just kind of happens depending on the hormones, because he didn't get stuck shed for super long, and it was on weird specific places, like his little foot over here, or the little part of his tail on here. It just seems to randomly come and go where sheds will get stuck and you kind of have to finagle around it, and that's another part where the bathing comes in real handy, especially if you're brushing them, because it helps to loosen those scales that need more water, more hydration. And sometimes it'll get to a point where it's been like 3 months and they've had the same shed, and you just kind of have to work it off slowly, because if you don't, it eventually will constrict the area and cause necrosis. Another thing too is, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of studies or people saying this, but it's something that definitely helped with him. You kind of have to socialize them early on. And what I mean by that is, you know, earlier I mentioned how I took him out for 10 minutes every day, hanging out with my finger when he was small. Well, when he started getting about medium-sized or a little bit bigger, that's when I started taking him on walks on my shoulder along with my dog. That's why he's like trained to where he'll just walk up and down and he doesn't care, he doesn't mind, he's all relaxed, he's treating me like a jungle gym, and I'm fine with that, because that's what I taught him to do. But at the same time, a lot of people try to just do that when they become an adult, and the adults will freak out if they've never been outside or they haven't been outside that much. So sunlight has the ultraviolet light spectrum in it, unlike any of the bulbs that you'd be putting in the whatchamacallit terrariums, and they see ultraviolet light very, very, very well. So it can even just be the difference of like a week since the last one. Like there was one time where I had him and I was walking him with my dog, and I got sick for a week, so I couldn't take him out. And then the week after I took him out, he was puffing his beard out, he was getting all super black beard, everything underneath was black, he was aggressive, he didn't want to be held by me, he jumped off of my shoulder, he was on the grass, he was freaking out because he didn't recognize me. But you kind of have to take them out more frequently and do it a lot more, so that way they're used to how you look in ultraviolet, and at the same time they get used to your scent, they get used to the way that you taste, because they will be licking you at some point. And it also helps them to recognize that other people aren't dangerous. Because there have been times that I've seen with other friends that I've had owning bearded dragons, where if they've never really bit people until the end half of their adulthood, they just never trust anyone else. But I took him out and had him pet by like my dad, some of my relatives, other people, passersby, neighbors, etc., to where now he's not that aggressive against anyone else, and he's a little unsure. He's not gonna latch onto them like he latches onto me, but doing that really helps, because I've seen plenty of times where my friends who own bearded dragons will take them out and their bearded dragons will just start freaking out. It'll be super stressful. Minor injuries can happen a lot with bearded dragons, even if you're a virtually perfect owner. For example, right here, he is missing a claw on here, and that was because he decided to jump off of a couch onto the floor, and he was perfectly fine, but his nail fell off. His nail just popped right off. It wasn't bleeding or anything. I still cleaned the wound, but it just popped right off. And they sometimes get these minor injuries. For example, he used to get a lot of small little injuries on his belly because I have an obsidian rock in his enclosure, and it's under the heat lamp but also under part shade, so it's mostly there for when he's trying to digest stuff and he can move off of it. It's not a heated rock or anything, it's just for the ambient temperature, and I've tested it before. It never really gets that much higher than 100, but when he was younger he would often fall asleep on it, and even though it wasn't at an unsafe temperature, he'd still get some slightly deformed scales, or they'd be slightly brown, slightly burnt. Or he'd even have some times where there's these scales that have popped off because it was too hot, and so there was, you have to clean the wound, you have to get him in the bath and things like that. And what I've done for that is I just take the rock out and I leave it out for a few days, and I just wait until the shed goes through or he sheds in that area, and then I've put it back. And ever since, he hasn't really had any issues. I mean, you can even see on his belly, it's pretty healthy, no more issues. He just really likes hanging out in the hot rock. Thank you for watching. I know the audio stuff wasn't that great and the video is a little bit choppy, but my editing software is having a lot of issues for some reason with this video, despite the fact that it's the simplest one I've edited in a while. That, and as you can hear with my voice, I've got some issue with my nose that's going to need surgery to fix, so I'm just always nasally and the audio is always going to be weird whenever I'm trying to do a voiceover or anything. Anyways, thank you for watching. I hope you found this informative or found something you were looking for in this video. Please like, subscribe, comment, and hype, or whatever the new thing on YouTube is. It really helps out because I'm kind of a starving artist right now, and yeah, have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.